talk, I ain't stop until I get it right. There's no walls in this prison that can hold me down. No way, oh, I'm so out of here. Oh, way, oh, I'm out of here. Oh, way, oh, I'm so out of here.
Hi guys, I'm Nate with Good Mayhem Racing. My business is now a dealer for TMR Customs, a fabrication company that's based out of Canada. I am now one of their dealers here in Texas. And the main reason that I am using their products is for motorsports. I actually have used TMR Customs parts on my 4Runner before I became a dealer. They went through the Baja 1000 and were fine. And now I want to use their products on other builds that I'm working on. If you notice in the background, there is a Toyota Tacoma that's underneath this TMR packaging, and I'm going to build out a whole bed cage for it, in addition to some other features that the owner wants for his truck. Think pre-runner, think chase truck, something in between. It's gonna be a really fun build, and I'd like to bring you along that as it develops and goes on. Realistically though, I have had a big gap in my garage space, and that is being able to work on a fabrication table. I have been using a wooden table for a long time. It's actually the desk I had in college. I built my own desk for my dorm room and then turned it into a workbench for the garage. And this workbench has followed me through the 10 or 11 years that I've actually been living in Houston. Now it's broken, chewed up, burnt. It's time to make something better for it. Why not replace it with something that's actually useful for welding? Cue the TMR Customs welding table. Think of it this way. If you need a welding table, spend a little before spending a lot. Get something that's good enough for you to learn with, then go buy something more expensive later. If you decide to buy everything expensive up front to make your shop just the way you want it to be, unfortunately, that's a great way to get into debt. So do your best to cash flow everything in your shop, so then you can be more focused on making stuff and with pride rather than freaking out about how to pay off a lot of extra debt. This is the 2 foot by 4 foot version. It's one of the larger ones that they sell. It is their flat edition, which doesn't have extra fixturing holes on the side of the table. That is a different class of table compared to the one that I bought. This one will do a good job of replacing my wooden table because I mostly use the flat surface on that. And as soon as I would need to use something that had fixturing plates on the side, I would go to the vise. Even so, this is kind of a stopgap from a table standpoint in the welding fixture world. If you are going to be doing this as a hobby or as a small fabrication shop, a table like this is a great fit for any type of small weldments that you're gonna do, anything under, let's say, 400 pounds. But once you get past like that 300, 400 pound limit and are needing a table that's bigger and bigger and bigger, there are probably some better tables or tables that are more suitable for your application. But in the meantime, this would cover anything that you would need in a regular garage setting, all the way up into very small fab shops work. Long term, I do want to upgrade to a heavy duty fixture table like what you see at Fireball Tools, but understand that I'm doing all of this business in a 500 or 600 square foot shop. The space in here is a premium, and something like this is better for the size considering where my business is currently at. The holes are 16 millimeters or 5/8, and they are on 2-inch by 2-inch squares center to center. The table has backing plates, stiffeners to make it stronger. And in the smaller orders, the smaller sizes, this will come inside the same cardboard box This one was heavy enough to where it was 2 separately dedicated shipments. So when I bought this from TMR's website, I saw 2 UPS shipping labels to make this table happen, and a third one for some extra fixture plates. Before you go any further in this process, take a look at both sides of your main plate. Make sure to flip it over so you can choose which side you want to be the bottom. This one here looks a lot rougher because it has a lot of extra oil on it. You can actually feel the sharp edges from the laser penetrating through, and even some scratches here on this side. All of this is completely fine. You are going to cause more problems with this welding table than the original manufacturing did. But make sure to flip it over so you can choose which side you want to be the top. Now that I have decided that this back side of the plate is going to be the bottom of my welding table, let's try to fit these plates together on it. Take a knife, cut them open, because you'll have short pieces and you will have long pieces that go the full 4 feet that way, and these will go the full 2 feet wide this way. The slats interdigitate with each other, and this plus sign you see here will go into its respective hole. Before we go any further, realize that we are going to be doing a lot of welding and grinding, so your safety squints matter, and so does your face. Step 1, let's clean off all of the dross and slag and anything that's like messing up the surface around the areas that we want to weld in this part. You can use a die grinder with a flapper disc, tiger disc, sandpaper, anything like that that can make for a nice clean surface to clean off some mill scale, oil, whatever. Okay, now all of this surface is prepared for welding. If you don't like the slag around the laser cuts on all your 2-inch holes, you could zap each one of them if you want and just break off those sharp edges. I'm not going to worry about that on this particular table because they're not in the way of these plates. Now that we've done the grinding on the table, let's grind on the plates. Realize that this looks like it's pickled and oiled steel or some similar grade that's been de-mill scaled already, as in the oxide layers are going to be very thin. Do not grind a lot. Your goal is to just make it bright, clean metal to where you can see the bright white metal surface underneath. That's it. Welding tables in general are supposed to be thick. This is thin. It's like 3/16 of an inch, around, what was that, like 4 or 5 millimeters or so? So you could do a lot of damage to this by grinding on it too much. Just break off the sharp edges, break off anything that could mess up your welding, make it bright white, stop. Now I'm going to tiger disc these surfaces here and make it easier to weld. Make it bright white and clean all the way to the edge of this, because that is area that you can weld with the other part. Okay, all of our cross plates have been ground, as well as the long ones. Now it's time to clean up your workpiece. Realize that whenever you grind, you're creating dust, and dust can mess you up later, so just clean it off. That way you're not dealing with it while you're welding. See that stuff right there? Yeah, it's a lot. From this point on, think of this table as being upside down. Remember, you are working with the bottom. After all, the skinny ones, the short ones go first. And they just go in rhythmically over and over and over down the full length of this thing. Okay, now all of these are in. Notice that they are kind of loose. And that is because you need to have some kind of slop and tolerance to make everything fit right. If a company like TMR Customs was to make all of these weld joints quote unquote perfect at this point with no slop at all, this actually would not go together. Your welding will fix that. Now for the long pieces. Get them nice and aligned. You can see how it's like resting on it. Now it'll be easier to rest in it. Oh, that was satisfying. Let's do that again. This is the last one. And in. Be mindful of gaps, because that alone will make your table warp. Now it's time to add the tie downs. These are the large tie downs. The small ones were out of stock when I ordered my kit. Use a long 3/8 screw or bolt. And now your goal is to suck down your joints with these tie downs. If you are assembling the larger welding table, these will have to be much, much longer. Okay, go ahead and start tightening these things down. They do not need to be super tight. In a perfect world, you would buy as many of these, especially the small versions, and lay them across the whole thing so that you can weld it all together at once. In reality, you might only buy 3 or 4 of them, and at that point you will need to clamp some of this thing, maybe use some other clamps you have laying around, and then steadily move them along from one side of the table to the other. When it comes to welding distortion, more weld makes assemblies like this warp more. Most of the time, tables like this that are welding tables are only tacked together, a minimum amount of weld. I will be doing the same here, and I'm not going to be holding this to the same standard that I do a roll cage or a pressure retaining weld or even structural stuff at work, because it's just a table, all right? Little welds, spot welds, over and over and over is good enough. So help me God. Okay. If you have more heavy things that you can weigh this stuff down, add them. So now we have this thing weighed down. These things are not clamps, however. Only weld in the area that you have clamped down. And I've got 1, 2, 3. I should have a 4th plate somewhere that I can use. bent that one. You can see that is preloaded a lot. Whenever TMR Custom sells the short pieces again, just buy those and use them for this. I feel like I'm making this thing feel the pain. Now, it is time to check whether or not this thing is flat enough to weld. Let me explain. Now we have many of these intersections clamped down. Let's see if they are flat. Granted, flatness is something that you will never have perfect on a table like this because you are welding it together. That is something that is much more inherent with a welding table that gets machined after it is formed and welded together. We don't get that opportunity here. As soon as we're done welding this part, it is what it is. If you want a real standard of flatness, do something else. But if you want the quick and dirty way of determining whether or not this area of your part is ready to weld, use a piece of paper. Try to insert the piece of paper underneath your plates. And if you can do it, bets on that plate is no longer flat to everything else. And if your edge bends up a little bit, well, just flip it around, do it to the other side. If I do it over here, I can insert the paper all the way through. This area is not good for welding because there's a gap. Try to push it through here, no gap. Good, bad. Clamped and ready to weld, not ready to weld. Can I do it over here? Yeah, I can do it there. I can't there. For all my sharp-eyed viewers out there, this is my plug for my welding machine, this Everlast welder. And unfortunately, there's a vehicle in the way between this plug and the wall outlet it's supposed to go into. So this is going to be a brief interlude in this build. I need to disassemble my truck to get my welder plugged in. Why don't you just park the truck outside? It is raining a lot right now, and this truck is not watertight. I'd rather not deal with that, especially since I need to increase my square footage over here, and I can just do that by taking off my bash bar in the back of the truck. And there's the bash bar off. It ain't perfect, but right. Close enough. You can scratch a little bit of paint on a race car. And we're plugged in. Goodness, that's tight. That's really tight. Whew. If you've ever wondered why you need a long ground and a long tungsten setup, if you've ever wondered why you need extended grounds and long tungsten torches and cables, here's why. If you're wondering how long is too long, this is a 20-foot setup, and in my opinion, it's barely long enough. And our goal is to weld this thing up with as little distortion as possible while being a valid welding table. Again, little welds are your friend here. You're not trying to make long seam welds. You're not trying to make something that's structurally sound. The table is intrinsically strong by its shape, not by the welds that you give it. So the biggest thing, tack, move on, tack, move on, tack, move on, and do that over and over and over until your table is completely welded. Okay, I've already welded over half of this thing together. Again, I have little tiny welds, maybe around a 1/16 to an 1/8 inch thick and about a 1/2 inch long. A little more than a tack, but a lot less than a really, really strong weld. So I'm just trying to carry that all the way over. If you see these spots right here, that was me welding autogenously with no wire on these corners because I couldn't access this setup with my long TIG. I could have replaced the back end here, but I have a long tungsten, so I'm not worried about that tonight. And the rest of this thing is clamped together, so I've already done my paper test. The gaps are good, and I'm just going to zip through this real fast, and you get to enjoy the show. The batteries are low on all my recording equipment, so the microphones might die, but hey, welcome to Good Mayhem Racing. So if you notice, I'm actually putting my weight on another piece of steel. What's really strange about that is whenever electricity is flowing, you actually produce eddy currents or additional current flow in surrounding materials. So the fact that we are pushing current through here and this thing is within the coil of my TIG rig, you could actually put a voltmeter to this and to ground and you could see a voltage potential. There would actually be like eddy currents flowing through. It's really cool. It's called induction. It's also a very strange and odd way to get shocked when you've been welding something all day and suddenly you get zapped by something that's not even associated with the weld. Like the eddy currents are happening everywhere, but the chances of you getting shocked by them are pretty low. As easy as possible. Around if you're ever welding and you have your torch draped across your workpiece, be very mindful of any breaks or cuts in your protective sleeve because you could actually arc through that. I had that before happen while I was welding on the race truck. It was a really bad day. Oh, did you guys see that? This is turning on. Check this out. Oh man. The biggest question I have is which side of this is flattest. Granted, remember, we've already talked about this being a welding table that has no finished machining on it, so it's going to be warped, it's going to be curved. However, if you can get the flat side of the table in the area you're going to work the most, bets on you're going to have straighter parts. Pretty flat here, and then it starts tapering off, like this side's curved in. This side I did not cool as much as this side, so it was a little hotter, it had a little more distortion, and if I push it, you can see that it's lifting up the whole thing by 1/8 of an inch over here. If you welded this with MIG or took more time to keep it cool, you can see I kind of gave up right about this point here. I was just like, come on, let's get this over with. Take your time, do everything cold. If you're doing MIG welding, great. You're gonna put a lot less heat into it than I did with TIG. I'm Nate from Good Mayhem Racing. I will see you out in the desert, if not my garage. Like and subscribe for more. I finally have a fixture table. TMR Customs, check them out. Again, I am a dealer. Have a good one.